Greetings. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by the Nyaradza Group. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today, I'm in conversation with Dr. Matifadza Hlatshwayo Davis, the Director of Health for the city of St. Louis in Missouri in the United States of America. Enjoy this quality conversation. Dr. Matifadza Hlatshwayo Davis, Director of Health for the city of St. Louis in Missouri in the United States of America. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor.
Thank you so much for having me. Such an honor for me to be here, honestly.
So Dr. Mati, you will not know this, but you've been on my list since July. In a way, I'm happy that we didn't have this conversation in July because you've just been appointed the Director of Health for the city of St. Louis. If we had the conversation in July, I would not be able to talk to you about your new appointment. So congratulations. Talk to me about your reaction when you had that you'd been appointed the Director of Health for the city of St. Louis. What was the reaction like?
I don't even know if you can process something like that, something at that magnitude. To even be interviewing with the caliber of people I was interviewing with, for my boss to now be the mayor of the entire city, it's a completely different landscape than what I was experiencing before. This is the exact position that I've worked for my whole life. I've never been better suited for a position than I am now. Having said that, I'm only 2 weeks in. I was appointed on the 1st of September, only started on the 18th. So it's relatively new, but I'll tell you, even 2 weeks in, it feels like I've been doing this for a while. So many things that need to be attended to.
So as I was looking through your reading around the things that you have done, I must say that I got the sense that your education, your professional qualifications, it's as if somebody knew that one day you'd be sitting in that chair as the Director of Health for the city of St. Louis. Is that the sense that you get? Was this deliberate? Did somebody conspire, or there's a hand of God in this thing?
Well, I'm a Christian. I believe in God. I've been raised that way since I was a child. And so for me, this is divine intervention. I believe this is my calling. I believe I've walked this path. And it's not because it's been the perfect journey. You know, a lot of people think, wow, this was divinely inspired because look how perfect this package was. I think for me, it's actually the opposite, which makes it even more divinely inspired, is that there has been so many failures, so many knockdowns, so many reasons why I shouldn't be sitting here today that even start from my childhood, such that I have to be humble. I have to give all glory and honor to God because there's nothing about this journey that says I would be the Director of Health in this time at this moment. Having said that, as a woman who oftentimes, you know, we are left behind and we're not giving our due credence, let me be very clear. I've worked my ass off to be here. I have done the work. And sometimes, especially in my intersectionality as a Black woman immigrant in a country where white supremacy and systemic misogyny and racism are rampant in academic institutions, I've had to work harder. So very much have earned this, but also no. I mean, how does one take credit for this moment?
Absolutely. We'll get to the journey that you've walked. But let's go to, let's start with Cleveland, Lerner College of Medicine, where you got your qualifications as a medical doctor. First of all, what I want to know from you, two questions. Why Cleveland Lerner College? Point number one. Point number two, why medicine?
I think we have to start with why medicine. Why medicine is really the biggest question, because if you look at my background, when I was in high school at Arundel, I was a linguist. If you ask my teachers, what is it that I naturally flourished in? It was the languages. I was an avid reader, avid writer. I loved history. Miss Ridley was one of my favorite teachers because in history, I felt like I just followed the stories through the ages. I also love French with Madame Hale. And my English teacher told me that I wrote like Jane Austen. And to this day, I hold that in very high esteem. So if I had taken the path that naturally spoke to my talents in high school, I really should have been a linguist. But two things happened. Number one, the death of my father that we will speak about later, that truly shook me to my core, especially since I wasn't with him. And, being in a divorced household, it was a shock. And I remember being 15, and the only thing that brought me comfort was the thought that my father was with a medical team, and my hope was that they brought him comfort, that they took care of him more than just the medicine, because he was in a foreign land and very, very ill. And we only found out even about the illness, let alone his death, right up until the end. And that was a spark for me. But it was also the advent of HIV and AIDS in our country and how that impacted my own family. Family members where you couldn't talk about what happened. One in particular, whose name I'll keep anonymous for their dignity. Yeah. But where you go to a funeral and you don't understand why there is this cloud for this person that has otherwise been a leader and someone that is so well respected. And it was those two things that really made me want to do medicine. Fast forward to Cleveland Clinic. The money wasn't there. I mean, even for undergraduate, it's not as if my mother just had some sort of savings account with hundreds of thousands of dollars for an American education. From the time I was young, I'll never forget this. I was 6 years old. The first major present my mother got me was a bicycle. And I was so excited because I thought she wanted me to play. I could ride the bicycle around the streets. And she said, no, you can only ride that bicycle to two places, to school. Because as a single parent, she couldn't always take us to school. She had to go early. Sometimes she was away on flights working for Air Zimbabwe. And then the second place she said that we would take that bicycle to was the library. So we had a library card from the time we were young. And our mother very much early in our life impressed upon us that the only way we would be able to get out of our current surroundings was through education and through scholarships, because she didn't have the money. So we knew as children that if we wanted to excel, if we wanted the sort of dreams that we had at the time, that scholarships were our only way forward. And so every step of my CV that you see is because that was the opportunity that afforded me an education with a full scholarship. Wow. There wasn't partial. I played hockey for Zimbabwe, B team, not the greatest, but yeah, I played in the A teams of my school my whole life. I remember I sent a hockey video to Princeton, this Ivy League college, and they offered me a partial scholarship. I could do nothing with that. What does partial mean? Partial might as well be full school fees. So for me, every part of my CV that you see was, again, that divine intervention where I worked so hard to be of the caliber for full scholarships, but really the only places I could go were places that would offer me a full scholarship because the money was not there.
And yet you found those places that offered you the full scholarship. How amazing is that? How do you explain that, Mati?
Oh, it's the triumph of my story. I think because my mom instilled in me that, and this independence. Our mother wasn't the sort of mother who had the luxury of being able to coddle us while we were doing homework. Or, when you used to have those projects you used to do where it was like a big project where it was either an essay or a big arts project. We had to figure it out. My mom was too busy, flying, working deals to bring extra money. For her, the tenet of our upbringing was an education. She didn't have the resources. So we were going to school with children from affluent neighborhoods and affluent families. The only thing we had is that we were well-traveled because my mom had these deals through Air Zimbabwe. Right. But the rest of it, we had to figure out how to excel, how to stand out. So very early in life, I figured out that I had to study, but that I had to be different from everyone else. And I think when that came to my scholarship applications and my school applications, I knew that just straight A's wasn't enough. I always had to be multifaceted. I was this incredible athlete. I used to write. I told you I was a linguist and I used to write those national writing competitions in Harare. I used to win those. I used to be the captain of different organizations. So it was the well-roundedness. You know, I wasn't always the number one in everything, but I was always top 5 in about 5 to 7 things. So when you have a resume that looks like that, you pique people's interest, especially abroad, where you're also now international and you bring that cultural diversity. But I had to really excel, but also be multifaceted. And so at every stage, I was able to excel and be awarded these scholarships that are very rare for other children. And that's the part of the mentorship that's hard, because I think some people come to me for mentorship thinking that what I've done is easily reproducible, and it's not, right? Like in many ways, I've never seen someone being able to go through an undergraduate and a graduate and a tertiary education all on scholarships. That was really one of the blessings of my journey.
So to talk to me, mom is busy, she's flying Air Zimbabwe, on Air Zimbabwe as an air hostess, and you are home pushing yourself. Where does this roundedness come from? Where does this drive come through? Where does this purpose come from?
It's from this purposeful, intention-filled mother. She was no nonsense, you know, she had to be mom and dad. So she was intensely strict. You would think with a mom that's overseas, you know, a lot of the time that we'd have wild parties and do things. When I look back now, I'm like, we never took advantage of these times where we were home alone. But she put in our house Sisi, you know, who was family. And Sisi was someone she groomed. Sisi went to courses on how to sew. She went to learn how to be a chef. So we didn't have a regular Sisi. We had someone who was really primed to take care of us at the home when she wasn't there. We had family members, my gogo, my ninis, who would always be there. But we also had this intense respect and almost fear for mama that was like, she's no nonsense. That mine was not the house where you can pull those games. But on top of that, like I said, some of it must be genetic, and credit to both gene pools from mama and daddy. But we were taught to be intensely independent, I would say competitive as well, but we had to be creative to beat the rest. So when we did projects, the projects weren't just filled with the content, but they had to have this sort of artistic flair. And the rest of it, I guess, is just, you know, what God had blessed me with genes. You know, they say there's nature and nurture. I think my mom absolutely 100% fulfilled the nurture part of it, but the nature is only from God.
And then you move on to do a master's in public health, Mati, from Case Western Reserve University. Again, talk to me briefly, as briefly as you may, the choice and the key learnings from Case Western Reserve University.
So that was always intentional for me. I knew that I wanted to go home. And for me, when I saw the issues that were plaguing our region and in my country, what HIV and AIDS had done to devastate our population, a lot of the things that were plaguing health, it was evident to me that coming with some sort of highfalutin degree and only clinical expertise was not going to be what would help our country, but instead someone who understood that systems and structure and the socioeconomic interplay between health and what was happening in the country was key. And so someone had to have that public health knowledge to really understand how to overcome some of the things that had devastated our country and our region. That was always the plan for me.
So coming back home has always been at the back of your mind?
That was always the original, but you make plans and God laughs. You know, I met my hunk of a husband in medical school. He's an American. And, you know, we settled here as a family. And, you know, that's the part, you know, I'm hoping the tough question will be around the whole issue around being in the diaspora. The narrative that we always push about, you know, abandoning one's country and things of that nature. I carry a lot of guilt, and it's something that I think about all the time. And the way that I mentor people, the things that I take interest in philanthropically are always that way minded. But I also don't carry the fullness of the burden of the diaspora in the way that is convenient for certain members of leadership in our country. That burden should be placed on the people that have made it impossible for us to do our work. I will absolutely be unapologetic for the fact that I will not throw away the talents and the training that I have done to come to a country that has not made it feasible for us to bless it in the way that is there. And to also be thoughtful about where some of us can help more efficiently. I think there was a time when the narrative of the abandonment of the diaspora was convenient. That narrative is not one that I will carry. And I'm happy to go to one-on-one with anyone that wants to do that. So am I always in thought about coming home? Absolutely. I married an American man who knew that part of marrying me was all of this. It was my Zimbabweanness in its completion, and he's very respectful of that. But is it something that I think is part of my journey now? No. And do I think it would be ill-advised to do so at a time where I'm not able to have the impact I want to from within? I think that would be ill-advised, and it would be martyrdom for martyrdom's sake.
Let's go there. Let's go right there, right now. What is it that what would it take for Mati to consider coming back home?
Well, I started to raise a family. What everyone needs to know about me is, while you see the accolades and the video has gone viral in Zimbabwe of me being appointed, I am a mother first. I have told the mayor that I will literally quit my job on the day if I felt like my children were being negatively impacted. Aneni and Naniso are the reason I was put on this earth, is to be their mother. It is the joy of my life. It is the passion of my life. And it is the center of my existence. I just happen to also be divinely blessed to have skill sets that at the highest degree as well. But first and foremost, as a mother. And then I am in some ways very traditional as a wife as well. And my husband is the head of the household. So like any wife in Harare, there's no wife there that you would ever expect could be the one to decide where the family lives and where they take up, right? A wife of any culture in Harare, of any Christian faith, right, is a submissive wife. And I met my husband and he came from this foreign land. So I live in this foreign land with my husband and our family. However, having a gracious husband who's also a very forward-thinking husband, we've always made accommodations for the fact that whether it's for a temporary period or long-term, I may think we may have to relocate if that is in line with what we believe God has called us to do. But again, before anyone wants to challenge me, I challenge you, especially the men out there watching this. Would you be the one to let your wife pull the agenda of where you live? No. I found God brought to me a man from a foreign land. That is why we are here. So what would it take? It would take a lot of things now, because, being a doctor, the qualifications that I have here do not easily translate. So it means redoing certain trainings, exams for him, for myself. What does that look like for my children? Do I feel like I'm doing right by my family? Do I feel like the situation in Zimbabwe will allow me to be as impactful as I can be from outside? Because I would argue, maybe you would disagree, that right now my level of impact from where I am is likely greater than me for martyrdom's sake, packing up and coming just for the optics. I'm fine with people calling me a traitor and an abandoner, but I know what I am and I know what I bring to the table and what I'm able to build to be able to bring home. But the short answer is, I have to talk to my husband, much like most of the wives have to ask their husbands over there. That's the answer.
I agree with you, by the way. There is no doubt in my mind that in terms of purpose and what you're doing right now in St. Louis is hugely impactful. And we get to talk about some of that. Talk to me now. How old is Nani and Naniso?
Naniso is 1.5 years. So if you think about this, I found myself 7 months pregnant at the beginning of a global pandemic as an infectious diseases doctor, which is the discipline that basically has been leading the charge for this pandemic. So to be 7 months pregnant as a Black woman in a foreign land, then for a pandemic to hit, then to have my baby at the peak of that pandemic, at a time where the upswelling of racial injustice, George Floyd was murdered on the streets here 2 weeks after I had my baby, as a mother breastfeeding without my own mother here because she couldn't travel. She alone locked down, halfway across the world. I had to watch those images. If you ever want to know where that switch, where I went from, I'm quite happy to just be a doctor and take care of patients, to I now want to be an advocate, an internationally known medical contributor on CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera, to I want to now go for leadership positions like the one I currently have. That was the time. There's something, and most women will tell you this, pregnancy, bringing a child into this world carrying a child is something superhuman and supernatural. And then to do that and to be faced with not only your own mortality, but the mortality of Black and brown people, both within a country and around the world, we're being disproportionately impacted, like we always are, left behind. The statistics for who's dying and who's filling up hospitals with COVID, again, are Black and brown people, as it has been for decades. That was the impetus for me. At the same time, being at an institution, an academic institution, where I did not feel valued or seen, where I was the only, as usual, where my promotion and advancement was not something, and my mentorship and sponsorship was not in play. A switch went off and I started to create my own path. And that a year from then is where you see me now.
As Nyaradzo, we strive to continuously bring convenience to our clients. Nyaradzo Group is proud to introduce Sawi, a new virtual chatbot assistant on WhatsApp. With Sawi, you are now able to interact with us from the comfort of your home and can be assisted anytime via WhatsApp. With life assurance products, diaspora products, applying and assessing your policy, payment platforms, claims information, and any other queries concerning payments, policy information, or products and services. Simply WhatsApp Sawi on +263 712 992892 or visit the link showing on the screen to register and start interacting and receiving notifications from Sawi on WhatsApp. Now, join in and experience a new level of convenience 24 hours a day with Sawi.
Wow. And you have you've really specialized around infectious diseases. You went and did a fellowship with the Washington University of School of Medicine. You also completed a 2-year dedicated program on sexually transmitted diseases. And you also spent 2 years as a clinical instructor at the University of Washington, and you were a program director for infectious diseases again. This seems to have been something that you've specialized on and something that has turned out to be so right for the season that you're in right now.
Yeah, when you practice medicine is tough, eh? And that's why when I mentor young people, I'm very intentional. You need to have a pathway that shows intention, that shows forward thinking, but at the same time, the only way to stand out from the rest if you truly want to be successful is to build a pathway that no one else has seen before and a niche, right, that is needed, but that is not the same, right? If I am a carbon copy of 50 other people, I'm never going to advance in any way because really there's nothing that's special that I have to offer. So when you look at my CV, it's very intentional packaging. It's 3 different things.
Yeah.
You know, infectious diseases, both clinically and in public health, education. So if you look at my resume, it's a lot of teaching and giving talks and that sort of thing. And then community engagement. I started off talking in barbershops, hair salons, my child's daycare, wherever anyone would hear me. And the excellence will shine through. People are like, wow, she's brilliant. And by word of mouth, you're recommended and you're recommended. My CV is quite funny if you look at it, because there's about 2 pages of just my invited talks, because that's the community engagement. And what's interesting is when it was time for the mayor to pick someone to lead the city in terms of health, it was the community leaders who've seen me on the ground, who I've worked alongside without anyone, no cameras were watching, right? When you're just doing the work, they came to me. I didn't even know the job was posted, to be honest. And they said, we would like to see you in this position. We want to endorse you. Will you consider? And that is when I put in the application, was when 3 different community leaders came to me in that respect.
So I see an academic in you. Is that something that is bubbling under? Or medicine administration is the space that you think you'll end in?
Trevor, you're the first person to ask that, and it's a nuanced question. I see myself as an academic, but I don't think classical academia sees me always as an academic. So my time in academia was one of the most difficult and diminishing times. And I want to be very clear. I was trained by the best. I'm incredibly grateful for a training that I would have never gotten if I didn't go to these places. But it was also incredibly toxic in many ways, because again, when you're one of the only, there aren't people that look like you, that have your experiences. And therefore, there aren't people at a leadership position who are equipped to support the very unique journey that a Black woman immigrant in a country that is very clearly documented as not really reckoned with how it deals with diversity inclusion at multiple levels, right? And so that journey was very difficult because, again, what I bring to the table is not what is traditionally lauded over, right? Traditionally in academia, you need to be a researcher. And very specifically, a bench researcher, pipetting and discovering, or a clinical researcher. You see my CV, that's not what I do. And I'm unapologetic about that. I am in community engagement. I am an orator, I'm a teacher at my core. And the abilities to excel in the very specific way that I bring things to the table, I have not seen celebrated in the same way our researchers are. So would I like to be an academic as well as administrator? Sure. But will I put myself in spaces where that is not celebrated and mentored and sponsored with equitable opportunities for advancement and promotion? I will never, ever do that. Neither will I ever put myself in that position going forward. I believe there are institutions who value that, and I'm happy to hear them as we come. But for right now, the call is in public health. And it has worked. And I'll tell you that when I left an academic institution, I was at the bottom rung. A clinical instructor is the bottom. You know, I'd been asking for promotion for a long time and talking about that and what it would take, and, you know, being told a myriad of answers that I think there was a right on their side in some places, but also I wasn't being heard on other places. And when I left, people told me, what you're doing is rash. Your career will never survive without this big name. Your career is over. 4 months later, I'm the director of health for the entire city. So there are so many of us in these academic and these excellent institutions that are being told, just shut up, just be quiet, don't bring attention to yourself, follow the road that they're making. And we're suppressing the talents that we have. But not everyone, again, this is not something that's translatable to everyone. My story is not to say to all the children in these academic institutions, revolt, leave. Obviously, that's not practical. But the reason why I believe one of the places I should be is here is because now that I inhabit a space of certain influence and power, I need to help to change those systems and bring mentorship and sponsorship so that other young trainees who look like me, who have the same background and who want to do the things I do, can do that path and can do it in a way that's healthier than some of the times that I experienced.
Mati, I feel a bit of pain in you talking about being an immigrant. Do you want to unpack that for me, that experience, and what it has meant to you as a Black woman, African immigrant in the USA, in St. Louis, in Missouri?
Everyone will probably think there's this dream, right? That you leave Zimbabwe and you go to the Londons, you go to the United States, and it's a dream. It's just a land of milk and honey. You're immediately rich and everything is always easier. And it couldn't be far from the truth. I'll give you an example. When I was in Harare as a teenager, what was my fashion? All the American fashions. Trevor, what am I wearing now? All of these prints and natural hair. There's just a desire to, it's so funny, the grass is always greener, right? And even though I'm one of the most outgoing, it's clear I'm an extrovert, I can assimilate very easily. My family makes fun of me because they'll say, oh, so today you decided to put your Zim accent, but when you're on CNN, suddenly we hear an American accent. So I know that I have the ability to be a chameleon of sorts and to assimilate. But at the end of the day, I speak a second language every day. Every day. At the end of the day, in St. Louis for me, other than me, my own children have an accent and know my husband's side of the family. And then in institutions, you know, I came from a country where we are the majority. You know, at Arundel, Black excellence is just known. At Gateway Primary, Black excellence is obviously the standard. To come here where, you know, people treat you like that's some sort of other. So there's a lot of pain in coming here, and the fact that I have always been other. And when people think, oh, she abandoned her country and she just wants to be here, it's much harder for me. It would be easier for me to be back home from the personal side in many ways. And it's something that I struggle with. The community is not always there. You know, finding the African, the Vintendo African organization here has been one of the most comforting things. I remember I gave a speech and someone spoke to me in Shona and honored my late father, and I just started to weep because you don't have those support systems. But yes, a lot of pain because it's very hard being halfway across the world from one's family. It's not an easy pathway by any means.
I never got to see your father, but your father was a celebrated war veteran. He fought to help liberate this country. I sense some traces of him in you, even if I never met the man. Oratory, community organizer, engagement, all that kind of stuff. Talk to me about the impact that your dad had on you. Talk to me about the memories of your father on who you've become.
That's a tough one, hey, Trevor, because for my country, I'd love to tell a story that, you know, throughout my life, I had that with my father. But my father's story is a complex one. My father is a war veteran, should be buried at Heroes Acre. My father is one of the reasons why Zimbabwe is Zimbabwe and not Rhodesia. This was a man who from a young age was plucked from his home and sent abroad to train in the guerrilla war style, whose name, people don't even know him as Gaylord Themba Hlatshwayo. He is Mao. He is
Comrade Mao. Comrade Mao.
Comrade Mao. He's Comrade Mao by reputation and by law. But also, anyone I asked about Dedi said he's one of the nicest people you've ever met, one of the kindest, most good humans you've ever met, right? Many prominent business people will say, I'm not even where I am because Comrade Mao was so giving and he helped me to have my start. And yet he's a war veteran. And what people need to understand that we often don't talk about is I've taken care of war veterans. You know, when I left Washington University and I started off with a dual contract where I worked part-time at Washington University and then mostly at the John Cochrane VA Medical Center. That VA stands for Veterans Administration. So I've worked for two years at a hospital that primarily takes care of war veterans. That was the full circle moment. And so I know intimately that there is a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder, a lot of traumatic things that our soldiers go through that make it difficult for them to assimilate. So if you read stories of my father, they always lovingly put, you know, he used to frequent the bar at, you know, the war veterans would meet there. But what people don't understand from the psychosocial and the medical is drinking became a way to cope. How do you expect these men to come from intense battle, death before their eyes in droves, being separated from family to suddenly assimilate and be told, be the perfect husband, be the perfect father? So my father was both. He is a war veteran and a hero and a superhero to me. So much of who I am is who he is, but he was not able to be the husband and father that he wanted to be. And I don't think that was from any malice of his own. I believe that there were not enough transitional support programs for our veterans when they came home, that what we saw is just normal socializing and them drinking and being gone. And, you know, and that was hard for a young mother, you know, raising kids. And, you know, I remember, I have memories of him coming home and, you know, banging on the doors, you know, because he was intoxicated. But that doesn't take away from the greatness of the man. And so my parents divorced when they were 4. That was difficult. And the full blame.
When you were 4, the divorce when you were 4, sorry.
Yes. And I have memories of them fighting over me and the sort of negativity and toxicity. I think they did a very humane and mature thing to separate because together they weren't able to bring a household that was supportive and comfortable. And what really hurts me is the blame is on the woman. What kind of a woman who would leave and would embarrass the husband like that, right? When all my mother was doing is what I said I would do. I would do anything for Naniso na Aneni, anything. And I don't care what anyone thinks. And my mom knew that she could not give us the type of family environment in that environment. And I believe that she did the right thing. And I believe Dedi did everything he could with the tools he could. But unfortunately, he just never had that support. And so that man, that great man, I agree with you. I believe, and my mother will laugh and tell you that, there was a time I snuck out of the house when I was at Arundel to go protest when they were protesting the Constitution, because I wanted to talk about education. And I lied to Mama, God forgive me, and told her I was at the library with my friends. But the Herald did me dirty. I was on the front page of the paper. So when I came home the next morning, we used to, Mama was very structured, right? Very, very structured. You had to come, you had to get dressed, and we would have breakfast as a family, because there were few times that she could always be with us because she had to travel so much. So I came, she had the paper like this just in front of her face. She said, "Sit down, Mwanangu." And I sat down. She said, "How was your night last night? Was the studying good at the library?" I said, "Hey, Mama, it was good. We studied very hard. I think I'm going to ace my test." She goes, "So you just went to the library? You did, that's all you did yesterday?" "Yes, Mama, library. Then I came home." But I was okay, Mwanangu. So I ate, she was just quiet. She let me eat. Then she just put the paper down quietly. And on the Herald, there I was in the midst of this, it was a gathering, they used to have them in the town halls to talk about the Constitution. And there I am standing up with my hand up, and I said, "Dear God." So I think for her, for better or for worse, she always saw Daddy in me, and that spirit, and that advocacy, and that Hlatshwayo name, from Chipinge. There's just, it speaks from our ancestors, and Hlatshwayo. Every time I fly through Johannesburg, they immediately speak to me in Zulu. And then when I tell them, "No, I'm sorry, I'm from Zimbabwe," they say, "No, sister, you're ours," because of that history of where the Hlatshwayo clan came up into the Eastern Highlands of Chipinge. So I think it's okay to celebrate both, but to be honest about the other side, Trevor, and the more conversations we would have about what mental health and behavioral health, and especially what our veterans have gone through, it would be better for our families, because these are things never spoken of, and for many, they would say I'm dishonoring my father. In fact, I think I'm elevating him more. For him to do what he did for Zimbabwe, and for what he did for those friends who are now some of the highest business people in Harare, for him to have birthed all of these children, right? And to have supported them the best way, with the best coping mechanisms, with all the demons that he had to come back from that war from. That is what makes him an even greater man than the man in the history books. This is why. Oh, go ahead. But this is why I always say my mother is the hero of my story, though. And women are a lot of the times left in the shadows.
Wow. This is a huge subject, Mati. But in a nutshell, what should have been done to the war veterans when they came back? Or still, what should be done right now where we are with the few that are still left?
Well, first of all, we were stripped of the opportunities to have infrastructure by our ex-colonial leaders. And they purposefully stripped our country from the ability to be able to have the resources for the population that is the reason that Zimbabwe is mighty. Our community, our population, the Shona and the Ndebele and the other tribes, right? So I do not put any blame on the new administration. They came in purposefully, having been cut off at the knees, right? But in a perfect world, you have a public health and medical infrastructure that allows for wraparound services for our veterans that include access to free health, access to free counseling and mental health support for all of the trauma. And that's what it is, Trevor. It's trauma that they experienced in the war, and the ability to destigmatize that and not make it a part of toxic masculinity, where our men are not allowed to lean into the fact that this is very real and doesn't make them any less of men, any less of the head of their households. That's what would be available in a perfect world. But how? How would our government be able to do that when they fought for our independence, right? And were given almost nothing to build this country that had been stripped from us from these colonialists.
Wow, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I want you and I to unpack, but let's go to 1982. You were born 1982. I love, people say, ladies' ages must not be disclosed, but for me, this absolutely. For me, the thing is, look at you, Mati, so proud of what you've done. You're 39 years old. I think I've no doubt that the world is an oyster for you. You were born in Ashton Park. Talk to me about your upbringing in Ashton Park, and the distance that is between Ashton Park and St. Louis. is a world. Talk to me about that.
It's a world. There's nothing like the way I was raised.
Right.
My mom and dad had this, back then the architecture was different, but we had this house in Ashton Park that was that kind of Spanish flavor. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Trevor.
I do. It's
we had a big tree in the backyard, and Daddy had a dog that was obsessed with me and because Daddy was who he was, right? It was nothing for us to have these dignitaries in our home, ministers and foreign dignitaries just coming to have dinner. And I was a spoiled brat. Oh, my father loved me. And I'm sure he wanted a son. People ask me what my middle name is. Why do you go from Matifadza Hlatshwayo? All of a sudden, there's that little Gail. And it came from Gaylord, right? So Gaylord, Gail.
That's
I was his
name.
first.
Yeah.
And Mama was the only disciplinarian because Daddy would let me do anything. I would run around screaming, embarrassing them, saying all sorts of ridiculous things with ministers in the house. One of the stories, I can't even believe I'm telling this story, but the late president, the late first lady and our ex-president would tell you, my mother was the head air hostess, and I took great pride when I went on trips. Airplanes were like my backyard, so I would play in the chairs, and I'm sure annoy all of but you couldn't tell me anything. In my mind, the airplane was my mother's land, and she was the president as the head of all the flight attendants and air hostesses. So it was a trip. The very few times she got to travel with my father, he was traveling with the president, and my mom was the lead air hostess, so they brought me with them. And mom got on, at the beginning when they say, ladies and gentlemen, and they start the whole spiel that we're leaving. To me, that was like, everyone should be quiet. My mother is speaking. And so my mother started talking, and the president was talking to another dignitary. And I looked over and I said, shut up, Mr. Mugabe. My mother is speaking. And everyone, the plane went quiet. Yeah. My mom stopped speaking out of fear. And he looked and he just started laughing. And he said, I'm sorry, little girl, you're right. Your mother is speaking. And every time we saw the president, and I've only seen it in a handful of times, but when we were fortunate, he said, so you're the young girl who told me to shut up, hey? And apparently in circles, I was called a witch doctor, because who else could get away with doing that to a president? But my father would let me do that. We grew up joyfully. We used to play in the streets, and the ice cream truck would come, and we would get our ice cream, and we all played together in Ashton Park. I grew up with so many people, Ana Spiwe and Ana Paidamoyo, who were my friends and who I'm in touch with to this day.
And then for school, you went to, which schools did you go to? So
I started off at Bishopsley for 1 year, and then mom moved houses, and I think probably for financial reasons as well, we were transferred to Gateway Primary, where I was head girl. And from there, I went to Arundel before, finding scholarships to go to my undergraduate and medical degrees here in the States.
And, we talk about your mom. You've already, I think, shown us the kind of woman that she is, a very strong hand, a disciplinarian. She must be very proud of you. Talk to me about what she means to you.
So I've lost my mother to my children. I now am just a carrier of grandchildren. My mother is only interested in the grandchildren now. So my time in the sun has gone. And what that meant was she started to think, I need something to give my grandchildren by way of legacy. So she's just written a book called Exceeding Expectations. And it talks about her story. And a lot of that is about her style of motherhood and what she went to raise. Because Trevor, you think it's just me, right? She's raised a doctor. My sister is the chief legal officer for IPAs in South Africa, and has one of the most lauded careers in law that you can see. And my baby sister started her own brand strategist business and travels the world with it. That coming from a woman on her own, right? And that is not a mistake. That is intentional upbringing. She had to overcome her own demons as far as what happened in her marriages and what happened as a child to give us love and support in a safe environment. I never needed for anything. I always grew up happy. I never knew we struggled if we did, because she would always fix it. And that took a level of discipline for her. She couldn't just date men or have men coming in of the house. She sacrificed that part of her life and focused solely on her children. She instilled in us the importance of education. We were in church church and in youth groups, our whole upbringing. And in the summer times, to give herself the ability to just breathe, catch up, and travel, we were at all sorts of camps. She found horse riding camps that we would stay at for weeks, and other camps where we'd learn a lot of other ways to build us up in this well-rounded way. She is the hero of my story. That woman and what she accomplished to make us who we are today is nothing I've ever seen.
I've sensed a very strong person in you, mixture of you, your dad, and your mom. When you look back now at the kind of the way that you were raised, what is the thing that you think you got the most from both parents?
Daddy taught me that you can be a leader and you don't have to abuse that power, that you still must be kind and humble and a good person. Mama taught me strength, and she taught me faith in God, that nothing happens without first honoring God and coming to God and understanding that everything you got is from them, but also being unapologetically strong as a woman. She took a lot of backlash from divorcing at a time where that was unheard of, from raising us in a way that seemed very independent, but now people can see the fruits of that labor, and that we're actually very respectful children, despite the fact that she did do things that maybe other people thought were Rajsna at the time, right? From I think that's what I got from both of them. But both of them also instilled in me that you don't have to betray your culture to go to these places. What pains me sometimes is when people from our country, from our continent, feel like once they've succeeded, they want to now be white. They must be accepted by whites, and they must assimilate fully into that culture. I come here with a badge of honor. I've been on CNN with an afro, with braids, with Bantu knots. I was told that you should wear pastel colors and colors that don't draw attention. So that's when Warandidena. So now if you've seen any of my clips, I am in print all day. If you see my swearing in, I made sure my godmother, Auntie Loveness Makombe, had a tailor-made Zimbabwean tailor-made garment for me to wear. I wear my culture and and I speak about it with pride. And I speak about it because the excellence that people see in the United States, they must know. And they must reckon with the fact that it is Zimbabwean born and bred, because that excellence, that just because I'm one of your guests, I could carbon copy 50 of me from schools across Harare. And the difference sometimes in the ability to go as high as I am is only opportunity, is only the lack of mentorship and sponsorship. The one thing, our greatest product coming out of Harare is honestly the skill set and the level of talent. And what we need to do, what the government needs to do, what leaders need to do, is to provide infrastructure so that we can support and mentor, because we could be running, and I'm not even saying this facetiously, like the world, because I'm not even one of this, I'm not even the smartest of my friend group coming out of Arundel. Let me tell you that. I was probably number 4 out of 5 in our group. And that's just in my immediate friend group. No, man, we're excellent. We are a special people, a happy people, a kind people, and a people that have been put down and not given the opportunities. It pains me that hasn't been made widely available.
Can I push that pen point even further, Mati? I know you need to write somewhere, but we'll try and wrap this up here. What goes through your mind, Mati, with your qualifications, with your merit and the credentials that you have, sitting where you're sitting, when you look at Africa, when you look at Zimbabwe, and see the space where we are right now? What goes through your mind?
I was asked to sit on a board of directors a few weeks ago, just after I was announced. It was one of the, probably would have been the pinnacle of where I am in my career. To be on a board of directors, I'd be the youngest, one of the only people of color they've ever had. And they said to me flippantly, all you'd have to do for this seat is pay $5,000 a year. That's what they said. And then you'd also have to donate in different ways. And this is common, Trevor. People think you're a doctor and by the next day you're a millionaire, right?
Wow.
And they forget that my husband, for example, has a lot of debt, because in this country, you have to take out loans to become a doctor. He also came from a very modest background, as did I, right? So they very flippantly said that. And I use that story as an example, because while I want to push back on, the unfair burden placed on abandonment, right, for lack of a better word, on the diaspora, The moment I got that appointment, the moment it was announced, it is now incumbent upon me to sit down and be very intentional and clear about how I support first my country. Well, actually, let me not even put on airs and be fake. First, my children,
Yeah.
then my mother, who has done everything for me, right? Then my country. Before I start giving 5,000 a year to some board of directors in the United States, oh, Mati gives to charities in the United States. People here look at it and I'm like, you can judge me all you want until I've made sure that I am giving in a way that makes sense, that is not just for giving's sake, that actually speaks to what I've spoken about, right? I have to be the example that I'm expecting of our government leaders. They should be a bigger example than me. Let me be very clear. But I now hold a position that does not give me the righteous indignation of just saying, hey, the leader should be doing that. I'm now the leader. So where you are holding me accountable, I almost didn't take this interview because I know the moment it airs, all eyes are on me. And in the words of Janet Jackson, it's going to be, what has she done for us lately? Right? So I think that's what this moment now means. I hope people will give me some grace. I've only been in this job for 2 weeks. It's not as if I suddenly have everything at my disposal. But at the same time, I don't get that grace. With much responsibility, it requires so much. And what that is for me is really sitting down and making sure I'm intentional. I will not put money into a country that I'm very grateful to be in. They get my talents every day, but where I give back has to start at home in the very literal sense.
What do you say to people who say what you've just said right now? What has she done for us lately?
Not a lot, to be honest, right? Not a lot. I've been fighting to just get here. My story is painful. I have failed and failed and failed from lack of mentorship, sponsorship, or even people understanding that now there's enough data to show that immigrants in the US and people of color, the standardized tests that we take here are biased against us. That's now known literature, but that wasn't known when I was coming up. So I just felt like, why am I failing? I'm not studying harder. I used to tutor. I was a tutor to people. I could teach people to pass exams 3 levels above where I am that I was struggling with. And so there's so much I've had to do. I had 3 jobs, Trevor, in college. I had a scholarship. And then in order to pay for my room and board, I had 3 jobs throughout college. And that meant when my classmates could come home and from 1 o'clock start their homework and their studying, I would come home at 10 o'clock and start my homework and my studying just to support myself. I'm not this, it looks pretty on TV, but I have just arrived, Trevor. I have literally just arrived, and you've gotten me as I've just arrived. So what have I done lately? Gotten myself here, for Pete's sake. I've just landed. Give me a second to breathe, to save, to figure out channels, and to connect with people like you and all the people I'm connecting with to do the right thing. By all means, keep me accountable. But what have I done? I have survived. I have overcome odds that you wouldn't believe. I have been treated in ways that are so diminishing, and I have had to hold on to come to this moment. So while you see a viral video throughout Harare right now on WhatsApp and on Facebook and on Twitter that makes it look like I've just been living in the lap of luxury, I have been surviving. I have been overcoming. I have been fighting. There is nothing about my journey that says that I should be where I am right now. And yet here I stand. So no, I have done nothing for you lately except get here, make you proud, and now must be held accountable. Must be, to use this position to further people back home. I hosted at the Department of Health students. I'm so sorry, this is an important story. And there was a Zimbabwean girl amongst them. I was just supposed to come and be the fancy director and give some remarks, and then I had to rush off for meetings. And she was bold enough to ask my staff, please, I'm from Zimbabwe, can I meet the director just for 5 minutes? Her name is Chidomoyo. And I said, bring her up. I have 5 minutes between meetings. They brought her up, and she made a pitch, and she is my mentor now. The mentorship that I will give her through that journey, that is mentorship and sponsorship. I've mentored 3 other Zimbabweans, even when I was just in school. That may mean more in some ways than just a check that I write, because that means I'm giving them the legacy of being able to have opportunities that hopefully will give them careers that impacts their families and their families' families. So that's the small start, but absolutely I have to do more. And I would reach out to people here Let me know on Twitter, on my platforms. What do you want to see from me that is impactful?
So let me make this very clearly, and I'm going to say this once. We are very proud of you, which is why I'm talking to you right now. So we're very proud of you. You've said that, or rather, Miss, do you think that your purpose is beginning to be clear for you? Do you get a sense that you can sense where your purpose is?
You're so intuitive, Trevor. I think so. I think it's just starting.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been fighting for like 20 years of my life to get here. But in some weird way, this is just the beginning. I don't think you've even started to see the beginnings of what I'm capable of and what God is going to do through me. Mm-hmm. And that is really exciting, but very scary. Mm-hmm. But I don't even have time to sort of focus on that. I've taken on a job where I'm understaffed. My staff are underpaid. I'm in the middle of a pandemic, but there are other chronic diseases. I don't even have time to sit there and think, oh, look at me. You know, there's so much work. But at the same time, I think you're right. I think this is just the beginning.
So from where you sit right there, Mati, there isn't clarity in Zimbabwe about vaccines for children under 15, children under 18. If you were to advise Zimbabwe, what would be your view?
Unfortunately, because of the absolute mess that the so-called super leaders and the pharmaceutical companies have made of this pandemic, the global inequity makes it so the advice I give in the United States is not transferable to Zimbabwe.
Sure.
Why I say that is, as we speak, only 3% of Africans have been fully vaccinated for COVID, compared to 60% of North Americans. That level of global inequity, for me, is one of the main reasons why we still find ourselves in that pandemic, because we're so short-sighted in understanding that we're a global community. And if we don't bridge that gap, we never get through this. COVID just becomes a part of our normal, our new normal, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, I could not give my mother the same medical advice around the vaccine she could receive, because in Zimbabwe at the time, she only had access to Sinopharm. We did not have the same level of data and rigorous clinical trials that we had for Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson at the time. So I was giving my mother advice that was very separate from what I was telling people in the US. In the US, Sinopharm would not be accepted, neither was it even available, because we went with Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and Moderna. So my advice is this. If you have, you first need to look at the vaccine that is available in your country. Mm-hmm. You then have to have your clinical and scientific leaders, not politicians. I don't go to a plumber and tell them how to fix plumbing. I don't go to my child's school and tell them how to teach my child, right? And no one comes to my doctor's office and tells me how to take care of patients. It is bewildering to me that suddenly for COVID, the go-to trusted messengers are politicians, half of whom don't even have a biology degree. And I mean that here in the United States as much as I mean that in the United Kingdom or even in Africa, right? So your trusted messengers are the people who have done this work. What are our clinicians and public health and scientific experts saying about the data around the available vaccines in your country? If the side effect profile is good, and if the efficacy is good, then I absolutely recommend it. Not many of those trials have been done in adolescents in other countries who don't have Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson & Johnson. Right now, the only data that I have seen that I'm comfortable recommending for children 5 and above, we've just started rolling out in children 5 and above, but we have been doing children 12 and above for a few months, is Pfizer and Moderna. But I think the data is coming, and as it comes, you make those decisions. But it's also a risk-benefit analysis, right? If the data is not as rigorous as it is in other countries, you need to ask yourself, if we wait for the perfection of data, is the data good enough that it can have overall good impact? Or are we putting people in harm's way? It's a very nuanced topic, and I'd love to get into it with you more at a later stage, Trevor.
So, Mati, given the life that you've had, the experiences that you've gone through, and the lessons that life has taught you, what advice would you give to young women who look up to you justifiably, for the success that you've been able to achieve? What advice would you give to those young women looking at you right now, admiring you?
I'll try to get through this without getting too emotional, Trevor. I would tell them to never, ever give up. Never. So many times I was in dark, dark places. I didn't think I would make it. I was tired. And it was the prayers of my mother, the encouragement of my friends, and the belief in that my mentors had in me that kept me going. But I have failed more times than I have succeeded. I have been at the lowest of lows in a foreign country, and felt devalued and diminished. I have gained weight. I have been depressed and anxious at times. All of those things. And it took faith in God, an incredible support team, and a lot of divine intervention for me to get where I am today. I will say to people that say, well, I'm not going to have those things that you have. I understand that, and I'm very, very sorry. In many ways, we have been failed. We have been failed by the very leaders that should have created a Zimbabwe that made it so multiple Matis could flourish. And I say that with my head held high. This is not the country that my father fought for. And these are not the opportunities that should be available. We need to reckon with the fact that there is much to do by way of making sure that there are equitable opportunities for advancement and promotion, and for multiple young Matis to be able to do what they need to do, because you cannot do it without support, without mentorship. But people always stop at mentorship. It's sponsorship, Trevor. It's sponsorship. There are money-related things that need to happen. Education is not free, right? So there is, there's a lot that I can give a Mati like me. Don't give up. Believe in yourself. Your light is needed. Your unique gifts and talents are needed. But I also will not put the full burden of that on another Mati, another woman, another man in Zimbabwe right now. That falls on the people that have been charged with giving us a country where all can succeed, where all can attain, where all can become the fullness of who they want to be. And unless you're willing to do that, stop blaming us for leaving. Stop blaming us for being incapable of giving you what you expect of us. This is a bi-directional relationship. We need to do our part. I need to do my part, but you need to do yours. And that is where I would leave it, Trevor.
Mati, talk to me about the failure that's humbled you. Talk to me about the one or two specific issues that have dehumanized you as a human being.
That's happened on foreign shores, Trevor. Sure. Is that what you mean?
That's fine, yeah.
I knew that I had a light. I knew that I was able to do what I'm doing now, if not more. And yet I found myself in institutions that told me that what I was doing wasn't good enough, that my failures were squarely on myself. I wasn't working hard enough. I wasn't smart enough. And I should have planned better, for example. I should have pushed harder. I should have followed through. But I also remember the fact that while others, came from backgrounds, understood this culture, their families were either, an hour, 2 hours a drive away. I didn't have that. While, others were going day to day. My country's economy collapsed and my mother lost everything in one day. Her bank, she woke up and all her life savings, she was told there's nothing left. And the trauma of that. My father passing away, there just wasn't an understanding of the fact that now, when I was in a program director, when one of our trainees was having a tough day, it was, let's get her support and let's make sure that she's getting counseling and training. For me, it was, she's being lazy. Why is she late? Why doesn't she show up? Why doesn't she finish this? And there just wasn't enough intentional support, mentorship and sponsorship. At the moment that it was clear that my skill set was around community engagement and what that could mean, not only for the academic institutions, but our region and the country. Why wasn't I afforded the same mentorship and sponsorship that my peers were, right? Where was, and I should never have been put in a position where a person who's senior to me said, oh, you grew up in Africa. Did you have a pet lion and a pet giraffe? Did you swing from trees? That is highly dehumanizing, right? That would never be accepted in my own country. And yet, not only did I just smile along, and the humiliation and the disappointment in myself for not feeling empowered enough to say, shut up, you're ignorant, but to just let them laugh along while they talked about me like I was some sort of Tarzan character, right? It's the micro and the macro aggressions that dehumanize you over time, and over time start to make you believe that you aren't good enough. You're not really that special.
Yeah.
What you do is not as important as the researchers. That, I think, was what was truly dehumanizing for me.
Wow. Mati, you and I can go on and on.
Forever, Trevor.
Let me ask you the last question, Mati. Trevor Book Club is one of the most sought after part of this show. Share with us, Mati, if you may, 3 books that have made a huge impact on you that you'd want our viewers who are all over the world to read, Mati.
That is such a great question. I would say that even though I don't align with the politics and the backbone of this book now, Atlas Shrugged was one of the first books I read. I got lost in, and that really captivated me as a young person. I think I would read that book now with a different lens, but it truly moved me. There is a book that I'm looking up now. The main book that was meant so much for me was because of who it was given to me from, one of my longest standing mentors from Zimbabwe, and also because of the book itself, Zenzele, A Letter from a Mother to Her Daughter by Nozipho Maraire, one of our own.
Wow.
And it was given to me as a gift just the day before I got on the plane to come to the States. And I couldn't think of a better book that has been my comfort since I've been in the States, that speaks to our culture, that is from a woman to a woman, that is written by a woman who is in the medical field and who is beyond excellent, and that speaks to so many different life lessons that a woman should have. If I could gift that book, Zenzele, to every woman, every young girl, every child in Harare, that is the book I would gift them. And as corny as it sounds, it has to be the Bible for me. The Bible has been my core, my center. When I go left, when I go right, when I feel lost, that is where my mother leads me. For I know the plans you have for me, plans to prosper me and not to fail me, plans to give me hope for a future. And those who call upon the Lord shall find a new strength. They shall run and not grow weary. They shall walk and not grow faint. They shall rise on wings like eagles. These are the scriptures that have kept me, that have sustained me. Philippians 3:14, for I go straight towards the goal in order to win the prize that is God's call through Christ Jesus to the life above. These are the lessons my mother instilled in me when I want her, when I want that hug, when I'm crying on the phone and she just desperately wants to be there for me. This is what she brings back into me. So I would say those 3 books were formative in who I am now.
Wow. Mati, thank you so much for your time. You are very busy, I know. I wanted just to, as we conclude, Mati, to say we are so proud of you as Zimbabweans. You inspire us, you inspire the nation, you inspire young men and young women. And as we wish you all the very best. And like you said, my sense is that your purpose is just beginning to be revealed to you, that there's more and more that's coming from where God has shown you what He's just shown you now. And we wish you all the very best. So thank you so much for creating the time within your busy schedule. Allow me, Mati, to remain where you are, to focus now to our audience who are throughout the world, who are in Zimbabwe, on the continent, in the diaspora, and who follow this show on a weekly basis. Remember, we are out every Monday, Central African time, 7 a.m. And for you to make sure that you get an alert every time we have one of these quality conversations, please click on this red button to subscribe and you'll get an alert when we have one of these quality conversations. We've gone a step further and created a podcast. So scroll down this video and click to a link that will lead you to our podcast for your listening pleasure. Until next time, thank you for watching and cheers to you all.